it again.
Do that because you can measure what you say if that's what you want to do. So I think we've got 3 of these sessions scheduled over the next couple of weeks, and when we were talking as a committee about a month ago, when we had our last meeting, everyone together, we felt that see other parts of the sector were doing these kind of chats, and I don't know what it's like in your parts of the world, but certainly in the West and East Midlands, we've got a couple of very specific groups who are doing these quite regularly, and the collective conversation, I think, has been really positive. I think a lot of people have found it quite helpful in terms of opening up support lines and just getting a feeling for what's going on out there, and maybe a little bit of planning towards what the future might look like and what a new normal might be. And so thank you all for joining us. This is really lovely. I don't think we sort of knew how much attendance we were going to get, and blown away, to be honest, with 35 people for this first session. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you find some help in the next sort of 90 minutes or so. And we will keep nice and tight to time and sort of wrap up around 4:30. I know that for a lot of people that evening routine is really important. It certainly is for us. The little one will start getting grumpy if she isn't fed by 5 o'clock. So we'll try and wrap up by 4:30. But I think the focus for this first session that we wanted to have a look at was how we can maybe keep offering audio description services for online content. So obviously you don't need me to tell you about the surge in online content that we've seen over the last 12 weeks, led, I suppose, initially by the National Theatre and Andrew Lloyd Webber, and then picked up on quite quickly by a number of venues. And I know in preparation for this, Tim has been in touch with Ros and Willie, and both were happy to talk a little bit about how this is working. And I've seen your name today, Ros, attached to the production of Lungs at the Old Vic. So I wonder if you want to start us off, maybe.
Yeah, I'll start talking about that, because I think Willie can talk about the work that he's been doing with the National Theatre as well. And I think that other people, possibly Anne, would be able to talk to you about the newer software that she's working with. As far as I'm concerned, Zoom is a conduit for a live, socially distanced version of Lungs at the Old Vic. It's a two-hander, and it's going to be playing over 8 days, most of them already out. It'll be playing over 8 days at the end of June, beginning of July. And the idea is that Ali and I will be at our computers, in our home, in our sweat boxes, and we will be delivering the audio description live at that particular point. And we're using Zoom, but this version of Zoom that I've got at the moment is Zoom Pro. And Zoom Pro doesn't have the feature that I need. The Zoom version that I need for Pro is for going live is Zoom Business, which has an interpreter version. There's an interpreter element in that. And I'll be going in through that. We did a test of it a little while ago. It comes and goes. It comes and goes. We did a test of it a little while ago, and hopefully it'll be okay. I think the issue with this is that if you're going to have it, you need to invest in, if you're going to do this kind of work, you're going to need to invest in business, which is $15.99 a month, when all of us are earning absolutely zilch. We need to be very sure that there is going to be work out there for us. Zoom is the only thing that I've found that is being mooted at the moment for live performance. The only other things that people have tried are WhatsApp. We did a trial this morning with a few of us. WhatsApp has up to 8 people. You can broadcast to up to 8 people. But we found that with Wi-Fi being it was, and being what it was, it fell off the edge quite a lot, and it's reliable. And the other one that we was Google Duo. And Google Duo is something that you can have 12 people involved, you can actually output to 12 people. But again, we had a lot of audio problems with it. So nothing is perfect. Even Zoom isn't perfect. It wasn't designed necessarily for this. But if you'd like to tune in, unfortunately, with lungs, it'll cost you at least £20 because it is a fundraiser for them at the Old Vic. They are going to give people a particular an entrance link to go in. When you get there, people are going to have to choose the interpreter version. And I'm not quite sure how blind or partially sighted people are going to manage that. I'm not quite sure how good their screen readers will be with Zoom and whether they'll be able to use that in an effective way to get on board. So before we actually go live, Ali and I are desperately trying to get the Old Vic to engage with us so that we can do some trials, do some technical trials, and make sure that people will be able to get on. And I want to involve some visually impaired people in that so that we can find out if there are any issues about it. I'm going to pass on to Willie, who can talk about Reaper, I think. I think that's probably your, Willie. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, over the lockdown, I've been struggling with software. I was using Audacity. Recently, I mean, any kind of projects I've been using where I've had to use Audacity have been tiny, maybe little 2-minute videos or, you know, 10-minute videos, and then so I've been able to record all my description on Audacity quite close together and then fill in the gaps in between so they're all leveled out across the short video. But actually, I had to go doing this for 12th night, and it was a nightmare. It took me, I mean, over a weekend, I must have done about 16-hour days, both days, just to try and get the whole thing done. And I delivered it at 4 o'clock on Monday morning. So, I mean, it was a nightmare. So at that point, I said, there has to be something better than this. And Louise had mentioned, well, actually, Gary, our sound engineer at Vocalize, had mentioned Reaper before, and Louise brought it up again. And I thought, I'll have a go. There is a trial version, which you can use for about 60 days. And I just kind of plowed through it, really. It's one of those things where, you know, there is a user guide, but, you know, it's a software that's just designed for people in the music industry who are mixing bands and doing studio recordings and all of that sort of stuff. So trying to pick out the little bits that we need took me about a week just to get through it and to be recording anything at all. Once I did get to learn it, it's very good and it's very easy, actually. You know, you can bring your video onto the software, and you can work with, you know, there's a wave track for your video soundtrack, and there's a wave track for your own soundtrack, and you can put markers in where you want the audio description to be. So it's very, very simple. And in fact, I've been working with another describer, and in fact, Roz did the same thing. Where did you use it, Roz? I can't remember. I can't.
Yes, I used it for Small Island.
All right, you didn't use it for me though. With me.
Not with you, no. I've actually, yes, when we did Cendrillon, yes, you were using it. I was writing the script and putting the time codes in.
Yeah.
But then.
Yes. So did you use the markers? I can't remember.
No, I wasn't using Reaper at that point.
Okay. So
I did.
It's been later on that I've
of course, Jane did.
Projects in it.
Yeah, Jane used it. So basically, Jane put markers into Reaper, and she sent it to me with her description, which was all numbered, and I could just jump from one marker to another and record the description straight in. You know, so it was much easier. I mean, it took me a third of the time to do it. It took a couple of hours in an evening, you know, to do it. So it made such a difference. We at Vocalize, we've been looking at another software called Stellar, which has been quite troublesome, I think, in general. So I've been quite happy going back to Reaper again, because it's easy, and it's good as well. It's just you know, it's a one-off payment. If anybody wants, it's a one-off payment of 60 quid for the license. So.
And I suppose the other question is, have you found the relationships with the theatres, and what you might have noticed, you know, what you may have found different, what you may have has remained largely the same with the relationships with these venues, and things that other describers might benefit from, you know, in relationship to working in this way.
I think the bigger thing about it is that there's nobody there who knows anything about audio description anymore. All of the access officers that we would normally work with and who would be our ways in are on furlough, and of course they can't do anything. So we're talking to people from digital, and we're talking to people from admin, and we're having to really go and explain things in detail, explain the steps, and also the guys who need to do the processing for the sound to produce are not there. It's being handled by digital. You get a very varied level of competence really there, and I've just done one that really sounded terrible, and if it hadn't been for Gary Giles, the chap that mentioned earlier, I don't think it would be possible, and I'm still holding my breath to find out how good it's going to be and how audible it's going to be.
In terms of the relationship with the Royal Opera House, Jonathan is probably a better person to speak on this, actually, because any Royal Opera House stuff has come through, for me, has come through Sightlines and via Jonathan and Julia. So, Jonathan, maybe you want to talk about that.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, initially, Royal Opera House approached us looking at doing a series of 10 digital productions. So they were going to be 5 ballets from the Royal Ballet, 5 operas from the Royal Opera House archives. So all classic productions, all already pre-filmed, but adding full audio description. And we did look at the option of adding pre-show notes as well, which in the end we recorded just on the beginning of the broadcast transmission. We had 10 minutes at the start. So although the broadcast time started the same for the normal transmission and the audio described transmission, ours finished 10 minutes later. Because it had the pre-show notes on the beginning of it. Having quoted for 10 performances, the Royal Opera House then quickly came back to me and said they just wanted to trial 1 ballet and 1 opera, which we did. We had very tight turnaround times. Usually on the Friday before they would send us the material, the team would work on it. So thanks to Roz, Willie, Jane and Julia, who did some editing. And we actually found that a really useful stage in the process is to have a third person just reading through, because again, 2 describers are working solo, and you didn't have the opportunity for a dry run like we do in the theatre. So we couldn't iron out those kinks at that point. So by having an editor, they could look through the script, make sure we were using the same word for the same item, and there was good continuity. And that was really helpful. So we've done 2. They have awaiting a meeting, I think tomorrow at the Royal Opera House. They wanted to see what the numbers have been. Cendrillon wasn't so good because they didn't advertise it till about an hour before it went live. We managed to get some word out, thanks to Anne, who did an interview for Insight Radio and highlighted it. So we got word out. Matthew kindly advertised it on the Vocalise website. The Cellist, which was the second piece, the Royal Ballet piece, was a very short, hour-long, modern dance piece. So not a huge draw for a lot of the classic audio description audience. And I think we pulled in over 2,400 currently. Had tuned into the AD channel, which equates to more than 1 full house at the Royal Opera House. Initially, when they did that earlier this year, that was a world premiere, they did, you'll have to correct me, Jane, but I think it was about 9 or 10 performances. So if we equate if we equate to one full house, that's 10% of their viewing figures, which is really, really good. So that's where we stand at the moment. We're waiting for the bean counters to authorize the finance. That's the trouble. It always comes down to money. But the digital team have been terribly supportive. I've had the marketing team at the Royal Opera House. They certainly pulled it out the bag for the cellist, the second piece. Got lots of advertising out there, got lots of awareness going. We're getting some links that we've never had before with the theatre. And for those of you who know me, I've been pushing, Roz has been pushing me, and I've been pushing for about 8 years against this firmly closed door at the Royal Opera House to add AD to their live streamed film broadcasts, their DVD releases, and their Sky digital broadcasts. And the door has been firmly closed. Now we have our foot through the door. So fingers crossed, now we've proved that it can happen. And Reaper was good quality. The sound quality was pretty acceptable. Everyone's been very happy with it. Fingers crossed, we will move forwards.
It made an enormous difference having Gary Giles, our end, sound engineering it with the help. And it's very important, I think, if you can work with the venue, if you can get the venue to agree to having a sound engineer. They don't, most of their sound departments are furloughed at the moment. So some venues will just ask you to produce the stuff and they'll insert it. But really the best quality is if you can get them to allow you to use a sound engineer like Gary to help. It makes a huge difference to the quality.
And were those going out, sorry, I may have missed this, Jonathan, were those going out live or were you pre-recording those?
It was pre-recorded, but it was broadcast over a 2-week window. So it was premiered at 7 o'clock on one Friday evening, and it runs for 2 weeks, and you can access it at any point, at any time, and dip in and out of it if you wanted to. Can I just say, Neil, I think Hannah had her hand up to have a question.
Yeah, it's just a quick, 2 things really. I think Julia just asked actually. One was, generally, are you finding that places are asking for you to mix it, or that you would send them the individual WAV files and the time codes and they would mix it?
Initially, the Royal Opera House asked us to send a finished product. The one thing that floored us completely, and it was the Royal Opera House and us, because all of the team are working from home, I think we all underestimated the amount of download and upload time it takes. So when they sent us a video, we had to upload it onto Reaper. It took forever, likewise when we sent it back. And that was the thing that really sort of snagged the whole process. So in the end, Willie, you produced just an audio track, didn't you? And they linked it up together.
Yeah. So the other great thing about Reaper is that you can record, you can jump from one cue to another and record each description, especially if there's a big gap between them. You can jump from one to the other. At the end of that, there's spaces in between each of your recordings, obviously, but you can consolidate those separate tracks into one long track, so it'll have emptiness between. So all they do then is they just lay it onto the video.
Yes, that's what, because I work predominantly, well, I work completely off of TV and film. So I record on Starfish, and you can compile it so you have one continuous mono WAV file that then would sit on top. Because that was my other question. At the moment, are they being streamed on 2 individual channels? So you know what I mean? So is there an audio described YouTube bit and a non-audio described one?
Yeah, there is. So
technology wise then, is then, because I don't know, is there no way at the moment to be able to click, to say you could have one video, is there no way at the moment you could click an AD button and it would play? You always have to have 2 separate.
So I think that I think probably if there was a way to do that, they would have done it.
Yeah, I think
neither YouTube nor Vimeo have it.
Yeah.
So they have to do it separately. And of course, as Jonathan said, it means the audio description one runs about 10 or 15 minutes longer because of the introductory notes at the beginning. Both the National and the Opera House have attached them at the beginning of each piece.
And would that be the same, to say if you did a little intro for them on the Royal Opera House website, so say you did like the programme notes or whatever, would that always, if you clicked on that on a website, would that always have to take you then through to the YouTube video?
I think it's on the, I don't know, to be honest, Hannah. Unless they put a link onto that, onto that, the website, you know, beside it. I don't know.
You can either.
It's been it's downloaded in advance, quite a lot in advance, because of course these things already exist. You know, we've already worked on them in the theatre, so they download them. You can download them in advance, and then they are read out just before, as Willie said, just before the show anyway. But there isn't a way, they haven't done a way yet of being able to go from the notes directly to the show itself. It's ridiculous, really, that nowadays they can't do that, but they can't, and they haven't. And when they see what kind of audiences they're pulling, that may make it a little bit easier. But of course, they've got to label the audio described version extremely well, otherwise you have fake reading, because when we started out, we got, with 12th Night, we got 35,000 people signing up for the audio described video on the night. And we go, well, this is great. And of course, they all clicked away and realised that they were getting audio description. And then they all clicked away. It was still a really healthy, I think there were about 30,000 people who got it by the end, but it was a really healthy audience. But at the beginning, people are still getting confused between the audio described version and the vanilla version.
So if you have a YouTube channel, you can tell how many people stayed right to the end of the credits, or how many people left somewhere in the middle. You can tell with those, you can tell those numbers, apparently.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of the big advantages for this. You know, this format of delivery is that venues are going to have really solid statistics on uptake. And you know, for how long, and yeah, how many people stayed to the end, how many people, you know, dipped in and out, and I think as Rosa said, you know, it looks from and obviously I don't have access to the stats that the National Theatre would have for their own account, but even looking at the stats from this side of what you can see on somebody's, you know, public account, they look very, very strong, and that can only help in terms of putting it sort of increased. Pressure's not the right word, but certainly, you know, making the case to theatres for the importance of it. And I think with announcements today from Delfont that they're not going to be back until 2021, and I think that's, you know, for large scale shows that they're not the first, and they almost certainly won't be the last. You know, this is going to be delivery for probably for the next 12 months as an absolute minimum. Anne, did you want to talk a little bit about software from your point of view as well? I don't know whether Willie suggested at the beginning.
Yes, I don't have much to say really. I've been on the training sessions which are organised through Vocalise for this new software, which is called Stella. That's Stella with an R. Sadly, you can't drink it. It's problematic. We've had a lot of problems with it. I think it works in much the same way as Reaper. So I'm hoping to use it for 2 shows that the Royal Exchange are putting online. But just because I haven't used Reaper and I've had a little bit of training with Stella, so I'm going to go with Stella. Similarly to how Willie described, you've got the WAV file of the show, you've got the video of the show, and then you can type in your description and then you record it and it shows what you're doing. But yeah, very early days at the moment.
I would concur with Anne. I think Stella it has huge potential, but it's been created by and you know, self-confessed software geeks who wouldn't mind me saying now, but it is incredibly difficult at the moment to use. Having used Starfish compared to it, it's really, you know, find it really hard. But I do think what's good with Stella is they are really open to discussion. So you know what I mean? Like you say, well, actually, this really doesn't work. They're very good at taking that board because they're still really developing it.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
Matthew, do you want to come in and just update people on Vocalize and what's been going on, who you've been working with, and how it's panning out?
Yes, thank you, Neil. Vocalize hasn't itself had many commissions for digital. We've had one through the Globe, one through Donmar Warehouse to do an audio introduction for Midnight Your Time. And I think someone might correct me. Oh no, there's another one. We've had another one that's for a dance piece that's being done, and I think that's it. We've had a lot of theatre, a lot of our regular clients getting in touch and basically postponing, sometimes almost to a day, a year later, a show. I've just literally, while we've been talking, I've had an email saying that Frozen the musical will be delayed until March 2021. So, you know, we're getting a lot of that. So we've been focusing on promoting all the stuff that's being done by other describers and you're doing the weekly editions of The Interval, which kind of curates and presents audio described theatre, museums, film, anything really, like a whole kind of range of stuff, and sending out weekly emails in the place of our usual kind of what's on guides. And we've had a bit more interest from museums, but a lot of them are applying for funding. So we've been asked to do some quotes, and we've then given them those quotes, and then we're waiting to hear back. So we've actually had very little happening, and that's kind of why I took the decision to kind of put the team on furlough, and then hopefully they will be coming back at the end of the year. Well, they will be coming back at the end of the year, and as hopefully things start picking up for, as you say, for 2021. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear all the different methods for AD being explored, like Zoom and WhatsApp and these other things, and also the different software. As Anne mentioned, we organised a training session, which one of our describers, Andrew Piper, who'd kind of shown that, you know, he'd been trialling it. I asked him to put together a training course, and all the vocalised describers were invited to join it. And many on this call did join it, and I was in some of the sessions, and it was clear that there's some difficulties with it. It's also very glitchy. People seem to kind of suddenly lose all the work, or think they've lost all the work. Sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't. But yeah, I think they, as Hannah said, they have been incredibly good. I mean, Andrew after the training did a questionnaire for everyone who'd been on the training, and asked them, you know, what people had found the main fault with the software and what could be improved, and then sent that list to the guys at Yellow Umbrella, and they kind of went through and made loads of changes and said, right, we're going to bring out a new update, and it fixes some of these things. So I kind of I'm hopeful that it can grow and develop. The funding model for it is also interesting, in the sense that it is free. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to pay a regular fee. You pay if you kind of output a film or a video with it. So you kind of pay per use, and that was quite an interesting model for us at Vocalize, that we could then absorb that in, we could just account for a bit of that. Well, if we were doing loads of things, we could account for that in our ongoing the cost per production would be very low. Again, they've been brilliant about, you know, giving us loads of basically all the work that people did during training. They just gave us a credit for. So they've, you know, they haven't charged us for all the output that people have been doing while doing practice, which is again,
we have given
really
them
good.
gold dust, Matthew.
Well, I know. It's a two-way. It is a two-way thing. That, you know, we give them lots of feedback on their software. We give them loads of potential in the long-term new business. But, you know, that's, you know, so it isn't a one-way street. I do admit. But I'm interested how much. Hannah, how much does Starfish cost, for example? Is that a specialist audio description and kind of captioning software?
It's interesting. So I set up my home studio. So I was very lucky. I work predominantly from home. I set that up about 3 years ago. And Starfish is an eye-watering $3,500. But having tried everything else, it is by far and away, I don't want to work on anything else. The problem with Starfish, which is that, you know, I've talked to the guy who runs the company, you buy a license, and you have one license. So if I wanted to then employ Willie at my house to work at the same time as me, he has to have another license. So that's where it's expensive. So what we have been doing is I've been using subtitling packages. So you can create a subtitling package and save it as a .srt file. I use Yellow Umbrella to convert that into an ESF, which I can then load onto Starfish and record. And in Starfish, you can record, so it's exactly the same as I think you were saying, really. So you pull up the video with the time code, and then it dips the sound, and it gives you boxes to write in. You change those and edit it. And the thing that I found is very different to all the other software I've used is how accurate you can get the descriptions. So you really can get them as close and then leave a hair's breadth before they start talking again. And all of the other stuff I've used, I mean, I'm not technological at all. And the other stuff has just sort of blown my mind, really. It's just been so confusing and counterproductive. It's not as quick. It's nowhere near as quick. So for me, it paid for itself very, very quickly because you can turn it all around very quickly. So yeah, but the difficulty is then how do you grow that? You know, that's the place I'm in with the business. How do you then take on other describers when they've then got to work on different formats? So that's in the Yellow Umbrella. Have been great.
Yeah. I mean, if it would be $3,500 per describer for Vocalize, it would.
Exactly. And I think, I think what's come out of lockdown as well is that gradually more and more people have set up little home studios. So I think there are ways around that. But I think if we can find that golden nugget, then audio description takes off on TV, film, and across all platforms. But at the moment, Starfish have hold a bit like that, and and it's a real shame, really.
That's kind of what I had to say, Neil. But if anyone's got any questions about what Vocalize is doing or suggestions for what Vocalize could be doing at the moment, I'll be happy to answer. But
Great.
If you want me to.
No, thank you, Matthew. No, it's much appreciated. It's good to know where you're at. Ros, your hand is raised.
Yeah, just very quickly. The thing about Reaper is that you buy it and it's on your it's uploaded into your computer, whereas Stellar is an app, so you have to be online all the time to use it. And if you're online all the time to use it, at the moment with things being a little bit glitchy, I've noticed since lockdown, you know, I'm losing power really on Wi-Fi quite a lot. So there is a danger that you might lose work. But I think the reason that Willie and I went with Reaper really was because we had to get something up and running quickly because the ROH was ready, the National Theatre were ready, and we had to have something that was solid. Since then, we've used Reaper, we've become familiar with Reaper, and actually there's been some changes to Reaper. I don't know if you know, Willie, but Gary, bless him, has found a way of putting the titles in Reaper as well. So you can read the titles from Reaper rather like Stella. So you can read the titles from Reaper, so you're not having to have an iPad with your script on and then one eye on your recording equipment and another eye on your interface to make sure the levels are right. So you can actually see everything in one place.
Thanks, Ros. So it sounds like there's some good innovation out there, and you know, existing technologies that are being adapted. And I suppose with as the rest of the industry is doing, really, is this sort of repositioning of how you do these things in this new world. And I know from our theatre's point of view, we've spent the last 2 or 3 weeks working out how we can digitize our auditorium so that we can start offering streams from here, and we're having conversations with companies about how we might be able to put live audio description streams into that as well. So those things are going along. I suppose we're sort of heading up to 45 minutes of this now. It's probably time to open it to the floor, whether anybody has other innovations that they're aware of they want to share, or particular questions that they want to ask, or just ideas that you want to posit, really. Well, Ros's hand is up again. You're more than welcome.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I don't know if any of you have been listening to some of the audio description that has happened on television. I was thinking particularly about the RSC stuff that they're outputting on BBC4. It's not using the scripts that have been developed by the describers there. And what we're ending up with is something that is a little bit of a hybrid between film description and theatre description. It is the theatre description is being written by non-theatre describers. So we're ending up with something a little bit different. And I just wanted to sort of ask people if we feel that we should be thinking about getting in touch and finding different conventions. I mean, for example, with Romeo and Juliet, that was done quite recently by Red Bee, we had things like there's a stage being mentioned. In Juliet's bedroom, apparently there was a spotlight. You know, there were things like that that we would not use on stage. We would not be talking about the technicalities of it. We wouldn't be talking about stage left, stage right. So I think we need people to know there are existing scripts and that they have been developed for theatre, and we've got to find this fine line between the two experiences.
Well, sorry, I haven't got my thing to say, my hand up. And I know Veronica's here, when we did the Coriolanus, we both worked on a Donmar script beforehand, so we wrote the script. We wrote a new script because it was a recording, but obviously the work we'd done had a huge impact on the work we produced, and we certainly did what I would call a theatre description.
And that was for the Nationals stream 2 weeks ago.
Yes, the Tom Hiddleston one. Yeah.
I would just say that I thought the description for Coriolanus, the description for Cendrillon and the cellist, they were all excellent examples of audio description, a real sort of privilege to listen to. Often we don't get time to listen to our colleagues describe, so it was a real pleasure, I found. The Romeo and Juliet, personally, I found was functional. It didn't always tell me what I needed to know, but I felt that we weren't in the world of the play, and it was all about the cube is doing this, the cube opens up, the cube closes, which to me didn't lend itself to being in the illusion of the play. So I felt it was just lacking in being in the world of the theatre.
Claire, your hand's up.
No, yeah, I do think it's going to be a challenge, because I watched the National Theatre's Frankenstein, and they were doing aerial shots, which obviously a live audience wouldn't have had. So it's a really tricky one, because it completely takes you out of the live experience if you suddenly talk about an aerial shot. So perhaps we will have to develop a sort of hybrid between film description and conventional theatre description.
I think Sonali from the RNIB is on the call, and maybe I wonder. So I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but it'd be good, you know, if we think about how we could have that dialogue with the kind of the TV audio. And I know obviously audio description, TV audio describers probably in the call, but with the companies about this.
Yeah, thanks for putting me on the spot, Matthew.
Well, I know you're awake because we talked earlier today. Or was it yesterday now? I can't remember. It was yesterday. So.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because we all know BBC works with Red B on this. And BBC, I mean, initially they weren't going to describe. They normally don't describe anything that's not going to be on linear television, because the reason they're doing it is to meet their requirements, the Ofcom requirements. So I was quite surprised when they turned around and said, actually, we'll do this because it needs to be done. It's quite important. And I don't think that team is aware of the scripts that exist at the moment. So if you think the existing scripts are useful and can be adapted, I'm quite happy to make that connection. So it is the accessibility team within the broadcast. Equally, I think we could reach out to Red B. I'm not sure if anyone here has any connections. And obviously not offer them the scripts for free, but maybe whoever has the scripts can reach out and say, we've got the scripts. They don't need to be duplicated. Can we talk? So is that something that I can help with? If it is, do let me know. But I think they do have an existing arrangement, a contract with Red B. So this would be quite tough. May not be as, yeah. I foresee a few problems there.
Thanks, Sonali. I think that's really useful. I think there's, I suppose in the absence of a, a union or a body like that for audio describers, we remain sort of open to that sort of abuse feels very dramatic word to use, but that I know from conversations I've had with colleagues the kind of hoops that those organisations have had to jump through to get permissions from performers and designers and technicians and pretty much everybody else who's worked on those productions to get them out on YouTube for free for these streams and for the audio describers to get left behind, particularly if audio description is then being done to a, let's say, different standard ahead of broadcast. That feels strange and feels like something that maybe we can apply a little pressure from Ada about. And it's just seen Ruth just put in the chat about equity as well, and it may it's probably beholden on us to get in touch with equity and see if we can mobilize a little bit there as well, because I think that was my immediate response and admittedly coming from a slightly external angle on this with but just think, well, hold on, why aren't these audio descriptions being offered, particularly for shows which have already been audio described? The script must be sitting on somebody's laptop somewhere. Surely this is an easy to solve problem which could financially benefit audio describers who suddenly had all their work disappear, but would also benefit those audiences. So a couple of hands coming up. So I'll go to Julia first.
Sorry, can I just add there? I mean, this is quite common. Yeah, Neil, this is quite common. So we're looking at content going from theatre onto video on demand, but we've seen films going from cinemas into the broadcast sector. So Harry Potter, Di is here, and I'm sure she can talk about this. Harry Potter going from cinemas into TV. it would be described again for television. So you won't have the same scripts. So this has been done before. It's not the first time. And Red Bee has been in the heart of it. They've been this part of the discussion. But again, if you think these scripts are easier to adapt than write again, then absolutely reach out to Red Bee.
I've still got the scripts for Harry Potter, incidentally, if anybody wants them. I can't bear to throw them away. I've still got them.
Yes, of course.
But,
what about Harry Potter on stage? Was it used?
Harry Potter on stage, well, we're doing that. Tony and I do that at the moment, or we were doing that. As far as the films go, when they're on telly, that's my voice on them.
Yeah. And with the Romeo and Juliet and the RSC stuff, we have already made, well, we contacted the RSC about that. I think part of the problem, as Ross said, I mean, everybody at most of the theatre companies we deal with who deals with access is furloughed, and certainly the people at the RSC who would be aware and who would probably be making representations about the scripts are just not there, and the people who we deal with and we're talking to, and presumably the BBC are talking to, probably aren't aware of this at all. So although we've made representations, the channels are not there at the moment.
I think you're absolutely right on that, Julia. I mean, I think I'm one of the only theatres in the country who's still got all of his staff working and operating, including a sound engineer, if anybody needs assistance, who's very, very bored with very little sound to engineer at the moment. So if anybody needs a sound engineer, drop me a line, because I've got one sitting. I'm desperately trying to find work. I think he's painted in his entire house twice. So we'll save B&Q from a third round of paint.
It's your theatre?
Yes,
which is your theatre?
The Arena Theatre in Wolverhampton.
Oh, okay.
We're incredibly fortunate because we're part of the University of Wolverhampton. We've managed to keep everyone on. But I think the other risk that we have to be aware of, and that I think we're all kind of painfully aware of, is that a lot of those, I suspect, a lot of those access staff who are currently on furlough may not return if alternative funds are not sourced in the short to medium term. Roz, do you want to come in again?
I think the one thing that we haven't talked about here, and we should talk about, is how the audience is receiving these pieces. Are they noticing a difference between what they would get? Are they able to access it easily? Are they getting information in advance? Where they're getting their information from? Would they like it done differently? I agree with Hannah. I mean, I used to work at Red Bee, and so I know it's something that it would be very difficult to get through. But I think, we can let them know that there are conventions that we use in theatre, and if you want to make sure that there is a theatrical element to these productions, that we could share those conventions with them. But also, I mean, do our audience actually want that? Do our audience care? And unless we speak to them, we're not going to find out.
It's so tricky, isn't it? Because it's such a balance. This was a long time ago. Myself and Willie got together and we had to audio describe something that was a live event, but it was shown on television. So we had the balance of myself, who is used to describing for television, and luckily Willie, who is used to describing live and theatrical events. But we had a lot of discussion, I remember, many times, because I would be going, I can see what you're saying, but actually the viewer at home is seeing this shot. They're not seeing that shot because that's not the story that the person who has filmed it and the editor has decided to show them. So I suppose it's really trying to understand. I don't know the answer. It's really trying to understand who is telling that story, what is that story, and I suppose what's difficult, isn't it, is when you're filming theatre, they've chosen which shot to do for a reason in order to move that story on. So then is it important to say that there is suddenly a spotlight because that's where we've been drawn to, or is it about trying to recreate the theatre? I don't know.
You can never really recreate the theatre, because you say the decision's been made to you. When you're looking at the theatre, you're looking at the whole spectrum. You're making choices. The directors make choices for you, and often when we're describing in the theatre, we're describing reactions, not actions, because you can hear what the protagonist is saying, but other people are reacting to them. And if those reaction shots aren't available to us, then we can't really say them. We can't really tell you about something that you are unaware of. A lot of the people who are going to be using the service are partially sighted. So it's no good describing something that doesn't exist, that isn't on screen, because that is going to be an extra level of confusion and bewilderment for them. So we can use our theatre scripts as a guide, and then we rewrite them based on what we've got in front of us. But we rewrite them in a more theatrical way. I think this is what I'm getting at.
Isn't it true, though, Ros, as well, that in the theatre, we go along with the flow and we believe the setting? So we might have a bare space, but we believe it's Juliet's bedchamber. And I think that was the problem with Romeo and Juliet audio description, is they never told us where the location was. They told us what the set was doing or how it was configured, but they didn't actually tell you where the scene was. And that's the information I think our audience need to know.
Exactly.
And this is the same argument I have with TV. They don't really, I don't care if you're picking up with your left hand, I want to be in the world. I don't, yeah, I have this argument quite a lot.
Mo, go ahead. You're on mute, Mo. There we go.
I think there's an added issue with theatre on television or film, in that we don't have the luxury of a touch tour. So when I'm describing for theatre, it's wonderful to take your customers around the stage and say, you know, such and such a room is brought in from above, or such and such a room is shown to you through the stage revolving, and you can talk them through it, so that when you're in the world of the story, you don't interrupt the narrative. You can just say, you know, we're in the castle. Whereas if they haven't had the touch tour, you have to decide, well, do I or do I not describe the powerful visual element of the castle sailing down from above and then flying up away again? You know, because people can see that, and that's part of the delight of theatre, is looking at the astonishing technological achievements that the wonderful stage set people have created. But, you know, with a touch tour, you can do both. You can set up all that magic, but then not have it interrupt the story. I don't know what other people feel about having to miss all the touch tour stuff in order to describe something that's only on the screen. Do you include the theatrical wizardry, which is part of the delight, or do you leave it out because it interrupts the feel of the story? What do you think?
I think that's the beauty of, you know, at least having the introductory notes at the beginning, you know, tagged on to the very beginning. So you kind of almost have to listen to the notes before the things begins, you know, and at least, you know, we haven't got a touch to it, but at least we've got that, you know, at the moment.
Yes, because for Romeo and Juliet, which was a very abstract set, there was no audio, there was no introduction at all. So the describer was describing it as they went along without any explanation in advance, which meant that they had to put it in, but it also needed more sense of location as well.
Lovely, thank you both. Yeah, it feels like there is a need for some form of guidance or something that just sort of tries and pulls some of all this together, and yeah, we'll give that some thought. I wonder, just while we as we have a slight lull in the conversation, whether we have our international visitors from Ukraine at least. I was talk to him about somebody from America as well. I don't know whether that was as well, whether any of our international visitors want to give us an international flavour, give us a sense of what's going on elsewhere in the world.
Hi, I'm from the U.S.
Hi, Megan. How are you?
I'm from the U.S. in the Midwest, and we do live theater. I work for an organization called Mind's Eye, and we do live theater, and also made a very quick turn to video. We are using a software called Closed Caption Creator, which is a subtitling software, but they have a beta program for audio description. And the first show I did Cymbeline, literally with just Microsoft Doc. It was terrible. It took forever, and it was horrible. So I just put a call out and said, somebody give me some software, and on a Facebook group, on the audio description discussion Facebook group. And someone contacted me and said, we're looking for someone to try out this beta. So we've been using Closed Caption Creator, which I had not tried Reaper, but it seems like it's probably a watered down version of that, which has been very helpful for us. We also have been doing summer camps, which has been interesting, not theater related summer camps that have switched to virtual. So we actually had an old fashioned regular old conference call. So the summer camps were virtual, so they were like this. We had someone actually on a conference call describing the videos that were happening on the screen to the people that needed audio description. It was the best thing we could come up with, because also this was the first time they'd ever done a virtual summer camp. So they weren't, one day they used Zoom, the next day they were using Microsoft, the next day they were using something else. So they were using a different platform every single day. And we had tried the Zoom with the different language interpretation, and these were also kids, by the way. So the conference call was by far the easiest. It was very low tech. We had lots of dogs barking in the background and that sort of thing, but the kids didn't care. So that's something that we had going on. So.
Great, thank you very much. Just while that's been going on, there's been a bit of chat in the chat bar, and I'll just bring that in vocally just in case you guys can't see it. But there's a question from Jane, a tech question. Can anyone recommend any microphones for a home setup? Not too expensive. And Alice has replied with the Rode NT1A, which is about £170. I don't know whether anybody else has got suggestions. Apparently the Rode comes with a kit for everything you need, so that sounds like fairly familiar with that bit of kit. I think it's pretty good solution.
Sort of equipment available, and the podcast sort of kit works extremely well. But if anyone has any questions about what's right for them, I'm a qualified sort of sound engineer as well, so I can give advice about that.
Excellent, thank you, Tim. Let me go to there. Our visitors from Ukraine, how does, do you want to give us an update on how you're getting on?
Okay, unfortunately in Ukraine, audio description, it's in theater especially, it's a quite rare thing, really, because we only start to force those questions. But in Kiev Theatre of Operette, we made several experiments with audio description, and it was really great. We worked with whole set of preparation of play. We worked with artists, with actors, we worked with producer, and we have experienced how to make a play from the beginning, and how to include the necessity of audio description into the play. Actually, it was very interesting. And in Ukraine, we make audio description in theaters only live, only.
For some reason, my space bar is being very badly behaved today. Thank you for that, Kira. That's really useful. And are you in a similar situation to all of us at the moment? Everything closed, locked down?
Yes, and Kiev Operetta Theatre, they are on reconstruction right now. But I hope that in several months they will finish everything and we will start again.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, there's lots of really useful suggestions coming into the chat as well. I will make sure that's saved down at the end as well, so that we've got that along with the recording of the session as well. I feel like we've covered quite a lot of ground actually, and we're coming up over the hour. So I'll throw it open to the floor again if there's anything else anybody wants to throw in and discuss. Yeah, go on, Tim.
Can I feedback on what Ros was saying earlier on about hearing a little bit more from the community of people who are blind and visually impaired on what they, on how they are finding the YouTube streamings? I've got quite a lot of feedback from the NT Live stuff, the Coriolanus and 12th Night, and there hasn't been any criticism about them at all. The BBC 4 one, which was on the I think the other week, there's been quite a bit of criticism around that, saying they found it hard to follow, and they haven't really been understanding what's been going on. But the Coriolanus and the 12th Night, they've said they found it easy to get onto YouTube. It's been easy to actually find the audio description. It's been clear, the quality has been good, and a couple of people have even said that it almost transports them back to being in an auditorium, you know, because the audio description is so good. It's like, for them, it's been like sitting in a theatre, and they close their eyes and they can actually imagine what it's like being in a theatre, hearing that audio description, and hearing that. And also, I've been listening to them as well, and I've been incredibly impressed with them of how good the quality is. I think quite a few people have said to me that they've been struggling to find out about it, and I've been trying to get it out to as many people as I possibly can, you know, through the talking newspapers, through RNIB Connect online, RNIB Connect Radio. I do find that the actual sort of publicity sort of coming from the services themselves have been a bit slow. Like at the beginning, I was finding out about the streamings happening maybe sort of 48 hours actually before it was going to happen, and I found that not enough sort of time in order for me to produce something to get the information out and actually to make sure everybody can actually find out about it. It is improving, like for the next 3 and the final sort of anti-live streamings, they have actually released a press release around audio description, and that is, and I gave a lot of feedback around that, and that is great to see, you know, that an actual press release around the audio described streamings is actually going out to the media.
I have to say, Tim, that we were having the same experience at the beginning. 48 hours before, right, we're going to do it by Thursday. And hence Willie having to stay up until 4 to get it done.
Yeah, I think, but I've spoken to 30 or 40 people who are kind of blind and visually impaired, and I've had emails and had sort of feedback. And the YouTube stuff, there's a lot of frustration out there that only a small sort of percentage of them are audio described, and I think we can expect that. You know, I think if it's not equal for all, I think there's always going to be some criticism around that. And I think there's a couple of people were saying they were quite sort of disappointed that the Midsummer Night's Dream that's coming up isn't going to have an audio description because they weren't able to see that. And I think that you can't always please everyone, and like I feel quite grateful that the National Theatre have actually said, oh, we're going to fund, you know, and sort of commission audio description for 3 of them. You know, but I think there's always going to be some people who feel, you know, they're going to be disappointed because the show that they want to experience, they can't.
Thanks, Tim. Yes, I think we'd all echo what you're saying there. I think it's certainly from early days, sort of at the beginning of lockdown, when we were talking about these streams, and we were talking about them at Ada as well, and saying that, you know, this doesn't feel like enough is being done when we know that a lot of the resources are already out there. But yeah, certainly it was certainly. I knew about the audio description of the streams that are upcoming through the normal ways I would find out about streams, not through specialist audio description channels, which is how I'd heard about them first time round. Certainly the stuff at the Opera House and others, that was coming to me through audio description channels, whereas certainly the awareness that the 3 that are upcoming were being audio described came to me in the way I would have found out about the stream in the first place. So that's positive movement in such a short space of time. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, the demand is going to increase, and of course we're coming up to a point now where we're coming to the end of these free streams. I mean, certainly as we see with the Old Vic and their experiment with lungs, which certainly from emails I've seen today and Twitter, I think it was yesterday or the day before when the tickets went on sale, it was like being back in the old days when tickets went on sale and people got excited trying to buy them. It was you know, that's clearly working as a model. The interestingly cryptic thing that the National Theatre said about these are our last free streams, but there will be other things coming. I think we're all sitting and expecting some kind of subscription model system for these streams to continue, and I think especially as you know, as we said earlier, announcements are coming thick and fast about theatres being closed through to 2021. You know, that impact and about how we actually start to get finances into these buildings as well, how that we start this flow of money, whether it be the National or it be a pokey little studio theatre in Wolverhampton. We're all asking the same question, which is how are we going to get money through the box office between now and a period of time where we're going to be able to have financially viable audiences in our buildings. And I think, you know, we have to temper our campaigning to the point of getting the balance right between the importance of offering this service and the need to offer this service to the millions of people who rely on it, but also being aware that you know, theatres are you know, struggling in ways that they've never had to struggle before, and every penny is being counted. But at the same time, I think we need to be at the table and having part of those discussions. And I'm not sure how many people on this call are venue people. I don't think there are many actually, but I know we're all sort of waiting for, from a venue point of view, we're all waiting for guidelines. We've been promised at the rather vague date of sometime this month to see what might change and how we might be able to start getting people back into venues, and hopefully you're all able to maintain those relationships that you rely on in the interim. We've got about 15 minutes left on the scheduled time, but Mo's just coming in. Any recommendations for good quality, comfortable headphones? I can very much recommend the Bose Quiet Comforts, Mo, but they are phenomenally expensive. I think the old these are the last model, and they're still about £270 on the open market, and their new ones are well up over 300, but they're brilliant. I can also recommend the Neurophone, which do some really fantastic kit, and they've just released a subscription model for their headphones, which is worth having a look at. But happy to take any other recommendations for good quality, comfortable headphones.
I would say go for AKG headphones, and you can find them quite affordably on sort of Gear for Music, on the Gear for Music website, which also, while I'm speaking about equipment and bits and bobs, they have some amazing, very cheap soundproof options for anyone. I've got like a soundproof filter that I kind of put my, I attach to a microphone stand, and it bounces all the sound off. And if you've got a lot of background noises, or you're having to record where there's any sort of hums, or if there's a fan or a fridge or anything like that, it filters all the sound out. And I think that cost me, I think it was £55.
Excellent. I feel like we're coming to a natural conclusion on this first discussion, which is nice. And I'll give you, as my line manager likes to say, the gift of time by wrapping up. We have got 2 more of these scheduled, and Tim and I have had some discussion about what we might cover. But as there's such a great group here, just want to throw it out to the floor really, and see if there is sort of a consensus on other things that you'd like to discuss, other things you'd like to talk about in this session. Alice, I've just noticed that your hand's raised, so I'm happy to come to you in the first instance, whether it's about that question or others, and it'll give everyone else a bit of pondering time while we give you the floor.
Yeah, no, it's not about that question. I just wanted to say I'm really grateful to hear about different sort of techniques that people are using, particularly the Reaper one. I didn't realize you could import video into it. But just to say that for anyone that wants to try doing recording themselves, I just use SoundForge to edit my audio, just because I use that for audio editing. And then I import the audio into iMovie, which is free on Macs. And then you can do the kind of placement of your actual audio. And then you have a proper audio file that links to the film of whatever it is. So if anyone, wants a cheap way of doing it, but as Willie and the others were saying, it's the editing of the audio and chopping it and syncing it that takes all the time. So having it all in one program in Reaper sounds amazing. I think I'll definitely try that. So you can record it into it and then edit it. But I suppose there are various different methods we can all try.
Thank you, Alice. Di, go ahead.
I was just wondering, Ros and Willie, am I right in thinking that Reaper do a sort of a free test thing before you actually have to buy it? Or is that in my imagination?
Yes, you can use it for 60 days free.
Yeah.
You can download it, use it for 60 days, and then after that you buy. There are 2 licenses, so that and it goes by, it's a kind of honesty box almost. If you earn more than £20,000 from using it,
right,
then you pay something like 600 quid.
Yeah.
But if you earn less than that, as we would all do, then it's £60 for a one-off.
Okay, thank you.
Roz, do you want to come in?
My spacebar doesn't seem to work. I just coming back to Neil's question about what for future subjects. I think there's, because so many people are on furlough, and because we are dealing with people who don't know what audio description, in fact, what access, I'm a captioner as well. So what access means generally, they're asking questions right from the word go. We don't know when or whether, as you said, Neil, our access officers are going to be able to get back into the theatre. So should we be thinking about formulating a plan? Because people are going to be left behind. It's not going to be the first thing theatres think about when they reopen. They're just going to want to get people through the door. They want to get all of their functions back up again. But we need to keep access on the agenda, and there is nobody in the theatre at the moment who is keeping access on the agenda. And I'm just wondering how we can approach that, and whether there's anything that can be done from, in some cases, the resident describers who are not on furlough and would be able to help a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a great topic, and I think it would be worthwhile spending some time on that. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, as Pove's in the call today, who's my access officer, and I think she is one of the only access officers in the country that's still working at the moment. So hence why she got dragged into here today. Yeah, absolutely. I think Andrew from Derby's here as well somewhere. But I think he's on furlough as well. But Andrew, I don't know whether there was anything, or Pova, anything you wanted to bring in.
Yeah, it is difficult. I think the fact that most officers are on furlough, including myself, obviously this part of my role, and I have part of lots of other people's roles as well. That, I suppose, updates will come. I'm trying to make sure that it is on people's agendas, but that's difficult from a furlough perspective. But you just hope that as we recover and rebuild the venues, it will be all this work is incredible at the minute. So you just hope that is at the forefront of people's minds. But I do completely agree, Ross, that it won't be the first thing that quite a lot of venues, unfortunately, think about.
Well, I think this seems like a great an area that certainly needs a lot more discussion, and I think we've touched on a few things around it today anyway. So we'll dedicate the next session, I suggest, to this discussion and how we might go about doing that. I suppose there's two approaches to it. One that we can look at in the next, which is something sort of very concrete and something that we can do as a collective, or that Ada can lead, in partnership with various groups. But then I suppose the other thing is the softer things, which we could all have a responsibility for, which is just keeping that feedback back going to the venues that are doing it, or to the venues that are closed, and just reminding, I suppose, in some regards, reminding of their responsibilities, but also I know there was a bit of intervention that we were trying to make with the Opera House a couple of weeks ago, when the videos were on an unlisted YouTube setting rather than publicly available, and I sort of waded in with a couple of comments of, this is brilliant, this is fantastic, this is amazing, thank you, but also, could you do this for us? And I think all of us kind of adding to that conversation over the next few months, and just making sure that I suppose we're making a fuss of the people that are doing it, but also asking those tough questions of the venues that aren't doing it. And particularly, and this is me getting on my slightly socialist soapbox here, especially those owners of those theatres who, despite what they might say in their press releases, are sitting on billions of pounds, and should be providing these services, Lord Lloyd Webber notwithstanding, that I understand how the businesses work, and that yes, you are going through a tough time, but the way that Andrew Lloyd Webber goes through a tough time, I think, is a little bit different to the way most of the rest of us go through a tough time, and he a little bit of needling won't do him any harm, to keep those things going, and that's something I think we can all take responsibility for. Great. So I think that gives us something to aim for the next session, which is, Paula, is your hand up? It looks that way. Hi, Paula. Hello.
Hi. Can I just say hi to everybody, because I'm not a describer, I'm a visually impaired audience member, and I just want to thank you all ever so much for everything you do. Thank you for hearing some of those great voices out there that I haven't heard for so long, and hello everybody, and thank you very much also for the interval that Vocalize send out. I think it's brilliant. Keep that up, and I look forward to joining in on the next time as well. Thank you. Thanks for giving me a minute, Neil.
Oh,
nice
absolutely.
Joe here. Hi.
Absolute pleasure, Paula.
Hi,
Great. So our next session is Friday the 26th of June at the same time. I hope to see as many of you there that can make it. And Tim is managing invites to these groups. So if you have other people who you feel should be part of this, then please let's put them in Tim's direction. I think this has been really valuable. It has as well, just to echo what Paula says, it's just been lovely to see some faces and hear some voices that we haven't heard and seen for a few months. So thank you all for joining us. Yeah, I must pass my thanks on to Tim for doing all the hard work and the heavy lifting with the invites, because I set up a Zoom subscription on Monday morning, and that's basically all I did. So big thank you to Tim for all his work on putting these together, and hopefully we'll see as many of you as possible on the 26th of June. We'll have another really valuable conversation. We will make this available somewhere. I say that again as if I'm going to do anything other than look panically at Tim about how that might happen. But we'll make this available in both Zoom.
I've got a few ideas.
Excellent, good. I'm glad someone does. And we'll make those things available to you. So I'm just making sure I've got everything saved down here, which is great. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your weeks. And I hope the storms stay away from many of you, and we'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye.